Hey everyone, you might be thinking to yourself, having seen the thumbnail to this video and the title, nah, he hasn't really said it. But this is Daniel Haqiqatjou, and he spent the last couple of years seeing if he can scrape to the very bottom of the barrel. And I think he's finally done it with what he said in this video. Bit of context, this is him on Hamza's Den from a couple of days ago. And it was in a conversation with some guy talking about free will, as well as child marriage came up in it. So let's take a look.
You want to touch on the minor marriage flex?
Yeah, I mean, minor marriage, it's something that is not just particular to Islam. This is something that was universal. And there's a good reason why it's universal. It's because as soon as minors start going through puberty, they have all of these sexual urges. They need an outlet for those sexual urges. And the solution to that every culture universally agreed on is marriage.
That is just not the case. It's certainly true that child marriage was permitted in many ancient cultures, but nowhere have I ever seen, and Daniel would never give a citation that I've ever seen, that says they were doing this to satisfy the urges of the children. That to me is predator language. You look at these cultures, there were many reasons that child marriage went on. A big part of it is just ignorance to how much damage it can do to children. I mean, that is one of the main reasons that we prevent this, is because of the harm it does. And they simply didn't have the scientific knowledge, they didn't have the medical knowledge, etc., to know the kind of damage that child marriage can do. So therefore, it becomes a moral issue. So without that knowledge, yes, it's not going to be considered a moral issue in that sense. And there was all sorts of reasons why it would have been encouraged. Yes, okay, mortality rate for children was quite high, so anybody who's going to survive into adulthood, you want to get them making more babies as quick as possible. Yeah, there's also the thing of, in quite militaristic cultures, you'd be considered, you want to breed the next kind of generation of soldiers, etc. So there are different reasons for this, but nowhere can Daniel provide a citation. I challenge him to provide a citation that says, yes, the culture was doing this because they were worried about the urges of the children. They were worried about their needs in that respect. So therefore, they wanted to marry them off to gratify those needs. That is the language of someone who is trying to normalize criminal acts against children, because there's nothing that I'm aware of that historically backs up the way that he's portraying this.
So that's why you see in Roman culture, Greek culture, amongst Zoroastrians, amongst the Chinese, amongst the pre-Islamic Indians.
Yeah, again, find me a Roman source, find me an ancient Greek source or an Indian source or a Chinese source that says we were really concerned that, they were so horny at that age that they just needed an outlet, so therefore we allowed child marriage. Does anyone think that there's any historical record that supports that? I mean, I'm not an academic. I'm willing to hold my hands up to be wrong on this, but could anyone provide a single source that that's the reason that child marriage was allowed? Again, this is creepy predator talk.
Indians, like, they all practiced minor marriage. That was the norm. That doesn't mean everyone.
Well, again, it wasn't the norm in that it was standard for everyone. It was allowed in some situations. That doesn't mean that the average person was getting married at like 6 years old, which is what you advocate for. And it's often in their early teens or maybe a bit later, and many people got married later than that. So again, the way you misrepresent this is also quite creepy.
Got married when they were right, at the beginning of puberty, but
did he say ripe there? It sounded like he says ripe. I mean, the way he talks, you got to hope that this guy is on the FBI watch list. You really do.
But many, like, that was not considered unusual or immoral or wrong. Like, it was just unexceptional. This is the rule, basically.
Most of the time that would have been like children in their early teens, like 13, 14, 15 years old, which again is still wrong. I think it's still too early for marriage, but this is still way out of what you're advocating for, which is at the very least 6 years old. And you've advocated essentially that there's no minimum age. We've seen that in the debates that you had. I can't remember that Christian guy you were debating with on Modern Day Debates, but not only marriage, but consummation of that marriage could basically be as soon as you reach puberty. And he went down saying what? So 5 years old, 4 years old, 3 years old. And I think he was talking medically, it's possible at 6 months. You did not say that you would be against consummation marriage with essentially what is a baby. So again, FBI watch list.
So for people today to have a problem with it, it's very anachronistic and it's ignorant of human biology. It's ignorant of human history. And to think like this is something specific to Islam.
It's not ignorant of human biology or human history. It's the fact that we have knowledge of human biology they didn't have then, which is why things have changed. And no one is saying that it was just Islam.
Or this is something specific to the Quran. It's just ignorant.
Well, it's not ignorant. And as I say, it's not that people are saying that this was exclusively about Islam. But I tell you what is exclusive to Islam. Those people who are raised with a proper education, and particularly in first world countries where you don't have the kind of desperation that comes from extreme poverty and lack of education and all the other terrible environmental conditions that can potentially push people in this way towards supporting child marriage. There's none of that in the first world to that level. So the only people who advocate for child marriage in technologically advanced first world countries are dull apologists like you. That is, as far as I can see, unique to Islam.
And the other thing about like free will, while we're waiting, like.
So I just cut ahead because they were waffling on for a minute, and then they're referring back to the previous conversation with this guy, this non-Muslim guy who called in, which I haven't listened to, but they're talking about free will, and he brings it back to child marriage.
Minors have to have free will to choose whatever they want. So if you arrange a marriage, like if parents arrange a marriage of a minor, because you can arrange marriage of someone that isn't even born yet, like Islamically. And also this was in Christianity and other religions. You can arrange a marriage of a fetus.
Right. So by his own words there, I mean, he's including other religions in that. He's making a claim. I don't know if that's true or not, but he's basically saying that Islamically, you can arrange marriage with a fetus. And he's not saying that this shouldn't be a thing. He is not saying that he's against this. So we truly have reached the bottom of the barrel now. It can't get any lower than this. You almost do wonder, like, is this actually a parody? Is this just like one of the biggest trolls in the world? Because it seems like he's deliberately trying to be as fucked up as possible. I mean, no one in their right mind would advocate for this kind of thing, unless they are, well, again, unless they are so brainwashed and really believe in this medieval kind of interpretation of Islam, or maybe this is just one massive troll from him. I mean, you almost hope that it is, because otherwise, doesn't this just make him an incredibly dangerous person? Would anyone want to leave their children within 10 fucking miles of this guy?
That doesn't mean that there's sexual intercourse that is allowed.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so he's reached his limit. You can marry a fetus, but you can't have sex with it. So, okay, you finally hit a moral standard there. This is good to know.
Until you reach puberty, but
yeah, puberty, which can, as I say, I can't remember the guy's name who was you were debating with, but he brought up the medical documentation to say something. I think it's something like less than a year old, you can potentially reach puberty. And you did not say that you'd be against consummation of that marriage, even at that age, to essentially a baby. So, yeah, I mean, what can you say to this?
You can arrange marriages, but then the other objection that people bring is that this contradicts free will. Children and minors, they have to have free will. But
yeah, I'm not really sure. This is obviously related to the previous conversation with the caller that was before they started talking. So I'm not really sure what kind of point it's making, but I don't see what free will has got to do with it. But we'll just finish this last bit of the video.
The blind spot of that argument is that we accept culturally within modern liberal culture in 2023 that a lot of decisions for children are made without their consent, without their free will.
Well, yeah, there's a reason for that, and I think this is not, again, he loves to just do this stupidity of like modern liberal culture. Almost every culture sets limits for children because they know that they don't have the maturity to make certain very important decisions by themselves. Okay, so this is not just liberal Western culture. This is any culture which has any kind of sanity to it, is not going to allow children to have the same kind of rights and decision-making power as an adult, because it could be incredibly dangerous for them.
Kids go to bed without free will. My youngest one, without free will.
See, Hamza's got to just chime in there with such a fucking stupid comparison, talking about going to bed. Yeah, this is a real problem. I mean, yes, of course, you have decision-making over that kind of thing in order to set a good structure for your child, etc., because the child's going to want to stay up. But this isn't really the important decisions we're talking about. We're talking about decisions which could, like, genuinely harm their welfare. So therefore, you're going to do things like have decision-making power over medical decisions and stuff like that. You're going to have decision-making power over education and all these important things that are going to affect your life.
Yeah, so this is a violation of their autonomy, their individual autonomy. Or,
well, yes, you can argue that, but it's with justification. Again, you're not doing it arbitrarily, which is what you're trying to imply.
the whole idea of schooling, like you are obligated, legally obligated to attend these state-run schools. The child has no choice; they're mandatory. So,
well, I mean, there are private-run schools as well, which, I mean, they're going to have to stick to certain minimum state standards. But yeah, there's a good reason for that. And you can look at the world. You don't have to look at the world. Look within your own country. Look at America and then say, how do the children do who have got no formal education compared to the children that actually have some idea about the world? They're actually taught some basic information that's going to make sure that they're not going to be an illiterate idiot for their life. It does make a difference to their life chances, a significant difference. And it's even more important in impoverished countries.
where's the free will there? That's much more of a monumental effect on a child to be, we can say indoctrinated for 12 years in a row of his.
Well, I mean, that's already started if you're talking about your Salafi education into Islam. I mean, that indoctrination starts before school, but nobody's trying to take away your right to teach your religion. But the point is, yes, society says that if you're not going to be a burden, a drain on society, as well as the fact that if you want to make a success of your life and be a functioning citizen, you need to have some basic education. You're talking about learning basic things like geography and history and mathematics and how to read and write. These are basic things that children should know.
Or her life than marriage. But suddenly autonomy is not a concern when it comes to mandatory education. The rebuttal that the liberal will give is that, but education is beneficial. Okay, well, that's your assumption that
it's absolutely demonstrable by every metric that you can look at.
This kind of atheistic educational system, secularized education.
Well, it's not atheist. I mean, people learn, do religious study classes, so it's not atheist. And yes, in some Western countries, yes, it's going to be in a secular context, but that's so we don't get people like you who would try to enforce the idea that Islam is right and everything that goes against Islam is not true, like basic science, like basic history. So yes, we want them to actually learn something which is in accordance with reality, not with your religious dogma.
Educational system is beneficial for a human being. Many people would reject that on principled grounds and say that,
yeah, the principal ground that you'd reject it on is that you're a Salafi and you don't like anything that contradicts the Quran. And also, in particular case, when it comes to women, as you've advocated for yourself, you don't think education has any particular value, or at least this is what you portray, because you want women to be as ignorant and as compliant as possible.
Actually, marriage is something that's far more beneficial for a person.
Yet, which person is that? For the man who wants to have the 4 wives and the sex slaves, etc., and have a woman as basically a breeding machine. Not so much for the woman or the children, Ahmadad.
Being in a stable marriage, that's going to actually lead to a better quality of life, more.
Yeah, for who? For who, really? And can you really demonstrate it?
More happiness in the long run. Procreating, having this kind of family life, that's more.
Yeah, that's all you care about. And it's not even family life. It's just procreation and having your own little mini serfdom. You don't actually really care about family, do you? You care about breeding. There's a big difference between those two things.
Beneficial for the human being in the long run than, you know, learning geometry or learning, you know, social.
Learning geometry has got more value than being illiterate and being forced to have 12 kids by someone like you.
Studies about one particular country's history. So yeah, this is the response to the whole free will, minors need to have free will argument.
Well, again, I'm not sure how this argument played out, but the idea, I think it's more that you should have rights as a child not to be violated. So that's the point. I mean, you're arguing as if it's like, oh, you're denying the child the freedom to choose to be married and to have that consummated. That's not a freedom for a child. That's freedom for somebody like you who's advocating for what amounts to criminal acts towards a child. This is you advocating for your freedom to abuse. You're not advocating for the freedom for the children. And those who say that you shouldn't have child marriage are advocating for the protection of that child's rights. So it's not really to do with free will, except for the freedom to be spared abuse. But anyway, yeah, so sorry, that's the end of the video. But yeah, I mean, new low now. I mean, let's not forget, I mean, it came in the middle of it. Obviously, I've done a rant on either side of it, but yeah, this is it now. He's basically saying it's Islamically fine, it's permissible, it's not something he would go against to marry a fetus. So we've arrived at the bottom of the barrel. So I don't know what else this guy's going to do. You know, how can he go any lower? I'm really not sure. But this is it, folks. This is Daniel and the horrible hellscape he wants for the world. So anyways, that's all for me. It's a shorter one today. I hope you enjoyed as much as you can enjoy something as horrific as that. But yeah, I'll be doing a live stream on Saturday. Hopefully be celebrating 1,000 subscribers for the channel. So if you want to come join me, ask questions in the chat and everything, and we'll be hopefully having some ex-Muslims talking about why they leave Islam as well. So it should be a nice live stream there. That'll be 7 o'clock UK time on Saturday. Hope to see you all there.